Hi, I'm Chris from Development. I wanted to talk briefly about the new Corona HTML5 builds, which, if you know, are in beta right now with the daily builds for Corona, and in how they can work on your Coronium Core server. You can serve your files from your Coronium Core server that you build with the HTML5 builds, and also a little bit about the CoroniumJS plugin that allows you to interact with your Coronium server in your HTML5 projects. So this is new in Coronium 2.6.2 and does require a daily build of the Corona that will support HTML5 builds. So I'm at the documentation here, and we're just going to run through real quick, basically following the documentation. And here briefly talks about how you can host your builds, and then gets into the CoroniumJS plugin. Now, Corona HTML5 is a moving target. It is in beta, so CoroniumJS is considered beta 2. It's just a simple plugin at this point that allows you to access your custom server-side APIs that you build on Coronium Core. So the first thing I usually do is I have a project set up, and this is how I usually put together my HTML5 builds now. Is I'll have a general folder here, a project folder, and in there I'll have my Corona project, which this one is called game, and then I'll have a folder for my HTML5 output, which is just here and empty at this point. So we'll hop over to the editor, and inside that game folder in my project I've just put together a simple, here's just a text output, so we can populate this text with data that we get back from our Coronium server using our HTML5 build. Now I do want to let you know that I have bootstrapped this project with a tool called Corona HTML5 Builder, which is another tool that I put together, and I will display that in another video. I will put a link down in the bottom there in the description. And what that does is simply gives me a few different tools that I can use directly here from my editor for working with HTML5 builds. And so I'm going to do that. Those are all done using the terminal, and I'm using Visual Code. So Visual Code has a built-in terminal, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And the first thing I can do is I can run a build, and so I just do that by using Corona HTML5 Build. And what this is going to do is this is going to put together my first HTML5 build, and then I want to go ahead and set up a watch server which will update each time I update my Corona project. So right now you can see that we're not getting anything more than just what we've put in, which is just this ... in the text field, and that's coming here from this display text. So we have what we're using here is browser sync, and what happens is when we update the project and rebuild it, this browser here will automatically refresh, and we don't have to worry about new windows opening and things like that. The other thing I want you to note is that Corona is not running, so it goes ahead and sends the build command in the background to the actual Corona native. Again, this is because it's bootstrapped with Corona HTML5 Builder, so you can get more information about that in the video that's specific to that. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to jump over in our documentation, and what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add in the CoroniumJS plugin so we can call some server-side APIs and get some data back. So here in this section, the download, I'm going to go ahead and click here to download the CoroniumJS plugins. And this is simply a zip file, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. We can take a look at that. It just has these two files in here. And what we want to do is we want to grab those two plugin files and add them to our game folder here, our Corona project. So I'm just going to drag them over into here, into the root, and then we're all done with that for now. So we'll go ahead and jump back over to the code editor, and now we have those two files in here. and if we look in the documentation, kind of talks about that right here. And then the first thing we want to do, of course, is require our plugin into the code. So I'm just going to copy this example here, make it easy. And we'll do local core.js equals require CoroniumJS, and that will pull in our JavaScript plugin. And once again, going back over here to the docs, we can see we only have two methods here for the CoroniumJS plugin. Again, the plugin is considered beta. Once the HTML5 builds kind of stabilize, then I'll expand this plugin more, but for now it just basically will allow you to access your custom server-side APIs. So just like the regular Coronium client plugin, you need to do an init and pass it some information. So that's explained here. In this case, because the Coronium HTML5 plugin, CoroniumJS only works with the Coronium server, so you don't need to give it your Coronium host address, just a couple pieces of information. There's an example here. I'm going to go ahead and just copy that and jump back over into my editor. I'm going to paste that in here. And basically the init takes the key to your Coronium server, scope, and then whatever custom API project you're going to be calling your methods against. And this is all very similar to how the regular client plugin works. So the first thing we need to do is gather our Coronium server key. So I have a Coronium server running right now. I'm going to go ahead and jump over into the configuration section, and I'm just going to copy my server key, jump back over to the editor here, and we'll just paste that in. And I've chosen to use an API project called game. So I'm going to go ahead and need to create that. So I'm going into the API builder here, and I'm going to click new project, and we're just going to call this one game, and we'll add that, and then we can start to edit our API code here in the editor, which we'll do in a second. So to call a method against the CoroniumJS plugin, we need to go ahead and add that code, and that's using a method called API. And it takes a few parameters. The method name we're going to call against our game API, parameters table, and then what's called an event ID. And this is kind of similar to how it works in the client plugin. There's a little bit difference here on how we call the method name, but basically we're doing the same thing. We're calling a method and sending up a parameters table. And in this case, our callback, since we're using the JavaScript API and the HTML5 builds, we have to use the add event listener. And that simply takes an event ID and then the listener function. And again, down here at the bottom, we have some example code, and I'm just going to copy that, and we're going to pop that into the editor here. And that will go after our initialization. So in here, in this example code here, you can see that we have this core.js.api call, and then it's calling a method name, and here's a parameters table, and then the string here, that's the listener ID. And this correlates with the add event listener, which is has the same ID here. And then we pass a function with the event, and then everything else is pretty much the same as it works with the regular Corona client plugin for Coronium. You have your .result, you have your .error, etc. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to change up some stuff. We're going to go ahead and on our game API, we're going to create a method called greeting. So we'll change that to greeting because that's what the method we're going to call against. And then let's go ahead and change our listener ID to greeting. And then we're going to want to make sure that in our add event listener we update that ID here. So basically, once we get a result back from this call, it's going to call this add event listener. And then in the result, we're also going to add in a key called greeting that will hold our result. So right now, we are calling against the game project API that we're going to create, and we're going to add a method called greeting. We're going to pass the name Jenny. When we get our data back, it's going to go ahead and run this event listener and print out this result here, greeting. Now instead of printing it out to the console, I've gone ahead and already made this text field, so I'm going to go ahead and just output this to this output text. So I'm going to say output.text equals event.result greeting. So once we run this, then that text will update. That currently here just has the dot dot dot. So we're all set up now in here to connect with the Coronium server using the Core.js with an HTML5 project. So now all we need to do is go ahead and add our greeting method and return whatever we want to pop into this output.text. So back in my webmin here, now I'm in my main Lua for my game project API. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the test method to greeting. And we know we're going to be getting a name, so I'm just going to grab that. And then for the return, we're going to be sending a greeting key back, so I'm going to send a table. And we'll just say hello. And we'll just pop the name in there that we send up. And then we'll go ahead and save that up. And so now here in our custom API, we have the greeting method. We're taking in the name, and we're returning the table with the greeting key. And we'll capture that and display that. So if we jump back over to the editor, again, we can kind of look at that again. We're using the game API project that we created. We're going to call the greeting method. We're passing this parameters table with the name key. And then once that comes back, we're going to populate this text field here. So again, I'm using this tool called Corona HTML5 Builder. Right now my browser sync is running, so I'm going to run another terminal. Again, you can use, if your editor doesn't have a built-in terminal, you can go ahead and use just the regular terminal if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and do a build, and that's going to send the request. And once we do that, we can see we have this here, but we're just seeing the dot 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 still, so nothing's really happening. And the reason is we need to upload our files to our Corona server. So what we do is in the Coronium server, once you log in with your SFTP, the pages directory is where you'll store your HTML that's output. So in my game project here, I have this HTML5, and in there is this game folder, and that has my output HTML. So I'm just going to upload this game directory into the pages directory. So now I have game here. And then to access that, I just need to hit my Coronium server address and then /game/ it's going to unpack this here, and as you can see now, it's pulling this data that we set up for our custom API. And that's because it's running on the Coronium server now. It has access to that, and it doesn't give us the dot dot dot. So that in itself is interesting enough, but we don't always want to have to upload the HTML every single time we want to make some changes. So what you can do using the Corona HTML5 Builder, and this is specific to Coronium, is we can go ahead and set up a special proxy for that. So the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we have the address to our Coronium server. And we'll jump back over here. Now in my terminal, I'm going to go ahead and start a new browser sync session. So I'm going to go ahead and just close this one out. I also close the one out that was on the web browser. So this time we're going to do a watch, but we're going to go ahead and add a -- proxy. And we'll give it the path to the address to our actual Coronium server. And then we'll go ahead and start that up. That's going to open up a session for us, and you notice that we have the Hello Jenny working here already, and that's serving off the local host. And to further prove that this is working properly, we can actually just dump the game directory that we had uploaded. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that, and then we should be able to refresh this, and everything should still be working fine. So now we're able to do to work a little more easily without having to upload our builds every single time. And so if we wanted to make changes in, let's say, the actual greeting method here, so instead I want to say howdy, I can go ahead and save that, and then all I need to do is just refresh my browser here, and then I'll get my howdy Jenny, and that way I can work like that without having to continually upload. Now if you make changes directly in the Corona project itself, as in let's say we want to change this name to Steve, then we definitely have to do a new build. So I have my browser sync running in this terminal session. I'm going to jump over to this one here and run another build here, and it's going to send that request, and then it'll update this browser when it's done. And then now you can see we have Steve being passed through. So if you do make changes directly to the Corona project itself, you need to run a new build on it. And you can do all of this through the just the regular Corona application. The one thing that you won't be able to do though is this special proxying that I'm doing right now through using the localhost directly through to the Coronium server, so that I'm able to do changes here directly to my code, and then I can see that update without having to re-upload those files. So that is special to the Corona HTML5 Builder tool. So that gives you a general overview of how you can use the CoroniumJS plugin, which again is just a very simple plugin right now, just to call your custom server-side APIs that you build there, and then you can go ahead and if you feel like using Corona HTML5 Builder, you can watch the video on that, and that allows you to bootstrap a project. It doesn't do much more than just add this package.lua here, which has some settings in there, and then it allows you to build and do the updates without using the Corona app directly, and also kind of has a more high-speedy browser session that is a little bit quicker to do updates with, etc. So that about covers that. Hope you enjoy using that. If you have any questions, of course, post them into the forums, and that's about it. Thanks for watching.